Sharkast. 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 IAA Sharkast.
Good day, Inter-American Academy. We're glad that you're here with us for Sharkast episode 11 with a focus on standards-based learning. Today, we have some very special guests. We have our senior leadership team in the school that's been working on this initiative to make sure that our students are achieving at a high level with their standards and their skills. Today, we have Mr. Jarrell Adams, our instructional coach. We have Mrs. K, our famous principal. And by the way, this is a vodcast. Therefore, there's video. So if you're listening right now, you can actually turn your screen on and you can see Miss K. And she looks great today. And she has beautiful student artwork behind her. She's blowing you kisses right now. So go ahead and turn your screen on and you can check her out. We also have Mr. Chris Holmquist with us today. And then later on, we might have another guest that might pop in. So before we ask the question, what the heck is standards-based learning or standards-based grading? We want you to get a chance to meet our panel. So we're going to have each of them introduce themselves to the Inter-American community so that you can learn a little bit about them. Even if you think you know them really well, you probably don't know everything about them. So we'll go ahead and we will start with Mr. Jarrell Adams, our newest addition.
So hello, everybody. My name is Jarrell. Thank you for that kind introduction, Dr. Don. This is my first year at IAA. And prior to working here, I worked in New York City public schools as a fifth grade teacher, literacy coach, assistant principal, and principal as well for middle school. And I've also supported schools who are implementing standards-based learning, rubrics, and a wide variety of other educational concepts over the years. Prior to coming here, I was in Congo at the American school there. And I found out about this wonderful school in Ecuador called IAA. And I'm very happy to be here because standards-based learning is the future. And it's really good to be at a school like IAA where we care so much about students that we want to give them very specific feedback, not for a grade, but to help them improve and know what they already do really well. So thank you.
Thanks, Jarrell. That was a good introduction. So you've been a principal, you've taught in the Congo, you've taught all over the world, and we're very, very lucky to have you here. Your expertise has been incredibly helpful this year. And for those of you that are at home, you might not be aware of this, but we meet every single Monday afternoon as a faculty, and Mr. Jarrell Adams really helps in our training. As we learn how to get better at our craft, at teaching your kids. We love our IA students. They're awesome, and we try to get better every day so that they can be better. So now we'll have Mr. Chris Holmquist. He's actually an instructional coach too, but I'll let him tell you a little bit about that.
Hi, I'm Chris Holmquist. I'm in my fourth year here at IAA and going on to my 10th year teaching. I started teaching in Italy for an international school and then moved to Chicago. And then I'm now teaching here at IAA. I've been here for 4 years and I've had a variety of roles here at IAA. I started out as an elementary PE teacher and then moved into secondary social studies where I currently am teaching still secondary social studies alongside of my tech coaching responsibilities, where I am helping our lovely staff get used to this new world of virtual and online teaching, which for some of us has been a relatively easy transition. And for others, it's been a little bit more complicated because it's a new everything. And so, yeah, that's kind of where I've been and what I've been doing since I got here.
Thank you, Mr. Holmquist, and we love seeing your cute little son and on the Zoom screen sometimes, and he's growing and getting big, huh?
Yeah, every once in a while he decides he wants to join a meeting or two. It's not easy, but it's fun.
Jarrell, you didn't tell us, do you have kids?
I do. I have two boys who are here at IAA. Daryl's in 8th grade and Kai's in 5th grade with Mr. Karsh.
Awesome. Well, we're glad that they're here with us. Mrs. K, the famous, the one and only.
Hello, everyone. It's great to be here with you today. Most of you know me, Veronica Kaipagian. Students call me Miss K and parents do too. I've been the principal at the elementary school for the past 4 years. This is my 4th year at IAA. And before coming here, I worked for many, many years in education. I've been working in education for 25 years. I worked in Tunisia, in Mexico as well, in different international schools in the United States, in a public school as well as a private school, in Italy. And most recently, before coming to Ecuador, I lived in China. I worked at the International School of Beijing for 4 years before coming here. I have been a principal as well as an elementary school teacher, kindergarten teacher, middle school and high school world language teacher, and learning support as well. What else about me, Dr. Dawn? I think that's it. This is my 4th year here. I love being here. And it's interesting, Mr. Adams, that you said standards-based learning and standards-based grading is the future, because I think it's also the past. It's the present and it's the future. Why do I say that it's also the past? Because when I got here and I saw our report cards and I saw that we were grading with numbers and our little ones were earning a 7.5 in science and an 8.3 in social studies, I said, okay, let's change that. And that's because my experience in different international schools had been with standards-based grading and learning and teaching. So we changed that first year, but we'll get into that later. Thank you. It's a pleasure to be here.
Ms. K, you just made me think of something. We all have something in common. And I don't know if Dr. Don, if it's true for you, but we've all lived or worked in Italy. I just realized that.
Rome, Italy.
That's cool.
I
Italy.
interned in Milan, Italy when I was a junior in college for 6 months.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I'm sorry, but I visited Italy. Does that count?
That counts. Yeah.
I've never lived there. Okay. Well, Susan, could you introduce yourself to the Inter-American Academy community? Tell them a little bit about how many years you've been in education, where you're coming from, and why you came to Inter-American Academy.
Sure thing. My name is Susan Williams. I was born in Oakland, California. My dad worked for an oil company called Aramco in Saudi Arabia. So I grew up actually in Saudi Arabia. So I'm kind of a third culture kid. That might explain some of my weirdness, but probably not all of it. And I came to Ecuador in 1971, and I've lived in Quito all these years. I've worked at the American School in Quito. I was a teacher, a principal, a coordinator, and then was named director by the board in 2000. So I have been director for the last 20 years. And I was on my road to retirement and coming to Guayaquil because my children live in Guayaquil and I have 6 grandchildren in Guayaquil. So I knocked on the door of my good friend, Dr. Don Francis, and asked him if he could possibly find a small position for me at the school. So that's what I've been doing. I've been transitioning on to Inter-American Academy, which seems like a wonderful institution to me. Very close-knit community, people willing to help and willing to work together. And of course, the very exceptional leadership of both Dr. Don and Veronica. So that's my story.
And Susan, you are currently fulfilling the role of what? What do you do at IAA?
That's a very fluid question because it seems like it's always kind of changing a little bit. But I am the student support team leader. We have, I believe, 7 people on our student support team right now. in which we work with students meeting their individual needs, English as second language needs, learning differences needs, and we also have a gifted program as part of that. And so I work directly with the students in the gifted program, but as well coordinate all of the student learning plans. Inter-American Academy has an exceptional program that, you know, many schools don't have, in which you look at each individual student and you design a learning plan for those students that need additional support for one reason or another. So that's what I'm doing there.
Thank you, Susan. Also, I would thank Susan too, because being Inter-American Academy, we're the best school. We know that. We're even better than Americano and Quito. So we're glad that you came over to our school, Susan, so that you could be a shark instead of a devil, right? Devil? Are you guys the devils?
We are the devils, and I'm noticing a little bit of rivalry there, considering that we always win all of the sports competitions, but
we win all of the sportsmanship competitions. So
You
there you
do.
go. Our kids are
there
awesome.
you go. Yeah,
So
there you go.
We're gonna call your change, your triad retirement, we're gonna call it an upgrade for you. Is that okay?
That's definitely okay. It's definitely an upgrade. I agree.
We're glad to have you here. So we're talking about standards-based grading today, and it got brought up in the introductions a little bit that standards-based grading is not something that Inter-American Academy invented. It's not something that we made up. In fact, Ms. Kay mentioned that she used it in international schools around the world many years ago. And so let's start with that question for our expert panel. What is standards-based grading, or what I like to call standards-based learning? So it could be called SBG or SBL, because in education we like to use acronyms. But what is standards-based grading? This is a question for the expert panel.
Yes. Okay. For the elementary students and parents that might be listening, but more for the elementary students, this is a very short explanation. All of our students at some point during their education, they're learning concepts. These are concepts that our students need to know. We call them learning standards. And so when we talk about standards-based grading and standards-based learning, we're referring to those learning standards that every student is supposed to know in each grade level. This baseline is consistent across all the students at every single level. And that's what we use to inform our instruction. It guides our instruction. We're guided by these learning standards.
So you mentioned that the students, these are things that they need to know how to do, things that they need to be able to function to go on to the next grade level and then on to university and on to life. Why would we just start standards-based grading this year? I've heard that question from parents. Is that an accurate question? Ms. Kay, you can answer that because you've been here longer than I have, about 6 months longer. Have we just been doing standards-based grading at Inter-American Academy for 1 year?
No, thanks for asking. When I got here, as I was saying, my first year here, I noticed that this was something important that needed our attention. And so at the end of that school year, I remember it was June 4, 2018, I invited all the parents to a meeting at the end of the school year, and I explained what we would do for the following school year. So for the school year 2018-2019, elementary school completely changed their report cards. And parents understood that before we made the change, because I invited them over so that they could ask questions and so that I could present the new changes. And so we changed our report card and the way we were assessing our students that at the end of that first school year when I was here in 2018, at the end of the school year 2017-2018. And we kept that. Now we're expanding it to our entire school.
Right. Yeah. And just so parents know and are aware of it, I mean, you might be a new family to Inter-American Academy. We did standards-based grading last year in secondary school also, last academic year, before the pandemic, pre-pandemic. We just didn't do it across all of our courses. So we did it in English classes, we did it in middle school, and of course our elementary kids coming up into middle school, they knew all about it because they were using standards-based learning for several years before that in elementary school with Miss K. So it is something that we're 3 years into, and it's been a progression, but this is the first year that we're all doing standards-based grading, the whole school, K through 12. And so my question would be, is this a new concept that only crazy people at IA want to do, or is it something that's been around and that's in some of the other great international schools that are around the world? That would be my question. Anybody have any insights on that? Are we just crazy, or is this more common?
I remember being in elementary school, not as long ago as many of the people in this Zoom room, but I remember being in elementary school and being graded on standards-based grading, and that was a while ago. So it's not new, I mean, at all. It's been around for a while. And to add to that, it's, in my opinion, how we get through life. We're not given a grade on life. You don't get 100% or 90% on life. You have to learn skills to be able to do the next thing, right? So if you want to learn how to take over or to build a car, you have to learn how to build an engine before you can learn how to build the car. So you have to learn different sets of skills that build on each other in order to complete whatever task that you're putting yourself to. So saying standards-based grading is new or standards-based learning is new, it's not. It's how we live our life. And it's how I see it.
Right.
Yeah, I would just add that standards-based grading has found its way through many schools in many shapes and many forms over the years. When I started teaching 5th grade almost 20 years ago, I remember we weren't using standards-based grading, but we were using rubrics to help students track their own learning. And I think one of the most important takeaways from why standards-based learning is important is because students are at the center of their learning, and they can use rubrics and they have multiple opportunities to show mastery. And so even if you don't complete something perfectly the first time, you're able to self-assess, go back and find out, where did I go wrong and what did I do well, make those changes, and have a chance to get a second shot at success. And to me, it's always made sense, because kids should always walk away at the end of the day from school feeling that they've grown in some way. And I think success should always be available to them. And with standards-based grading, opportunity follows success, right? And so when we give kids the opportunity to resubmit work that they didn't master the first time, that's how we get them to success as quickly as possible. And it's the feedback that we give them that leads them to that success. So I think that this is something that isn't brand new. It's been here for a while, but we are ramping up how we use it, and we're improving how we use it to help guide students.
Okay, so it's been around for a while. Maybe some of you could mention some of the international schools that you know of that use standards-based grading. Do you, just off the top of your head, what are some other schools?
Let's see, we have the Warsaw International School, Singapore International School. Here in South America, we have the Graded International School of Sao Paulo, Brazil, Abu Dhabi American School, International School of Beijing. I'm sure you guys can think of others as well.
Yeah, so there's a lot of international schools all over the world that use standards-based learning practices. In the United States, where I come from, there are many, many schools and districts that are using standards-based learning practices. And why would they do that? Because first of all, we want to have goals for our students. We want to help them accomplish whatever they want to accomplish. We want them to be successful. And there are certain skills that they need to be successful. And so using a standards-based system allows us to have a system so that we can make sure they get the skills that they need so that they can be successful in the future. So why would you go away from a traditional grading system like A's and B's and C's, which all of us understand because we grew up with that, right? Or Chris didn't evidently, but the rest of us probably did. Why would we go to something like ME and MEE and approaching standard, and what do those mean? And that's just confusing for me as a parent or me as a student. What do you guys say to that?
I just wanted to add one thing before Chris goes on. One of the important aspects of standards-based grading is mastery learning. And I think if you've been in education as long as I have, you see that the systems in which students don't actually master a concept or a skill, and then they're promoted on to the next level, those gaps in their learning process begin to build up over time. And so to me, one of the most important aspects and one of the most positive features of standards-based learning is mastery learning, and making sure that all those kids are picked up and all of them are moved along as they master each of the skills, the concepts, and the standards related to their curriculum.
Thank you, Susan. Chris, you can
Yeah,
go.
kind of echo that. I think that standards-based it offers as a teacher the ability to quickly see how my students are doing and where they are in these standards, and I can quickly tell which students I need to work more with to be able to get them to that mastery level, as Susan was saying, of that standard. I can also see quickly who is already beyond it, who might be ready to move on to something else. And that's something that's really important, I think, as well, is with the standards base, we see when a student might be ready to be accelerated in some way. And I personally remember having problems with this in high school because I was graded on my work ethic or my ability to do homework. And I didn't do the homework because I already understood the concept. So I thought, I'm a bad student, I'm not going to do the homework, but I did well on the test. So for me, standards-based grading as a student would have been a lot better because I proved that I mastered the skill. I proved that I already knew it, but because I wasn't doing the homework, I was being penalized for not being very good at working at home.
It's interesting you went back to high school or to your own education, because to be honest, as a child, sometimes I believed that my grades were based on whether a teacher liked me or not. And, as students, we always had these debates about which teacher graded the easiest or which teacher graded the hardest. And what I love about standards-based grading is that it's not about the teacher. It's about the students learning, and the fact that the students have the criteria in front of them and they have the rubrics in front of them. They're able to self-assess their own learning to see if they are progressing towards what the standard is. It's not something made up. It's not something you have to guess. The teachers are sharing with the students the performance criteria in the beginning, giving them feedback and guiding them along the way. And then the feedback they get is not an A, B, C, or D. They're told what their strengths are and what their weaknesses are. And then they're given an opportunity to go back and resubmit work and strengthen the areas of weakness. So I think it's more specific and it's more clear.
I completely agree. I was one of the secondary teachers that was piloting standards-based grading last year, and I could sit down with my students and they could ask me why is my grade the way it is, and we would sit down with the rubric and I'd go, here's what it is, you tell me what your grade is. This is the rubric, this is what you're supposed to be meeting, you tell me what you think your grade is. And they would go through, we would work through it together, and they go, okay, I'm not really quite there on this particular standard. I don't necessarily know how to contextualize an event in the grand scheme of history. Okay, perfect. So now you understand where you are and you can see where you need to go. It makes it a lot easier for me as a teacher to be, I can almost tell the students, here, give yourself a grade, because they can look at the rubric.
Chris, that's the highest form of learning, right? To be able to self-assess yourself. When I taught fifth grade, I used to have a buddy reading program where the fifth graders would go and read to the first graders. And what I loved about watching that happen is the fifth grader would tell the first grader, hey, you left off the S at the end of that word, and you have to pronounce the endings of words. And hearing a fifth grader talk like that, I realized it's because that fifth grader had a rubric. It's because that student had a rubric that they used while they were reading. They're now able to share that with the first grader to help that first grader become a better reader. So that's one of the strongest parts of standards-based grading, is having kids able to self-assess their own learning.
Mr. Adams, I just wanted to let our listeners know, if they're not watching, that they could look at the screen right now, because I've put up a chart called Visible Learning 250 plus influences on student achievement. And I put this chart up as you guys were talking, because what you're talking about is what students really achieve, okay? We know that universities have been saying for 40 years, students are coming to them not prepared to be able to be successful. So programs were started like advanced placement courses, where students could take a college level course that would prepare them, or international baccalaureate IB programs. These type of programs started because universities were saying, kids are coming to us and they're not prepared, even though they have straight A's, even though they have a 4.0, they're not prepared. The reason why they're not prepared is because they were not part of their education. They were learning what each teacher preferred and jumping through the correct hoops to get a good grade in that class. But they weren't showing, like Susan said, mastery. They weren't getting the skills that they needed to be successful. So this is a research, a meta study, which means it's thousands of studies put together that really tells us very clearly as educators what really works to help students achieve at a high level. And if you're looking at the chart at home, red is bad, yellow is not good. Green is kind of in the middle, is something that doesn't really make a difference one way or another. But if you're getting blue, and the darker blue you get, and the higher the number to the right, that's your effect size is, then the more significant that type of teaching or instruction is in helping students achieve. So I'll just bring your attention to self-reported grades, where my cursor is, if you can see it, has an effect size of 1.33, which is an incredibly huge effect size, if you know about research, that essentially says that with the naked eye, I can see the differences in learning for that kid. In other words, that kid is achieving at a high level. Maybe they're making 2 years growth or 3 years growth in 1 year. And we see that with our students, self-reported grades. If they're using the rubrics, if they're at the center of their learning, our kids are making those types of gains. We just did a midterm map testing as kind of a benchmark for us as teachers to figure out how are our students progressing. We found that many of our students have already made 1 year to 1.5 years growth in half a year, even though we're virtual. And it's because of standards-based grading practices. So I don't know if any of you want to weigh in on that, but I'll get off my soapbox. Pretty significant data as far as research goes.
Going back to the grades, the way we used to grade before, can I share a little story? When we introduced standards-based grading and learning at IAA, one of the parents shared in that meeting that she grew up thinking she was a bad student. She grew up thinking she could not learn, she was not good at learning. And she said her self-esteem was very low because she was earning 6 and 7 and sometimes 8s. And so the difference, going back to the previous comment about the changes we're making, instead of our students now earning a 7 or a 10 or an 85%, now our students are receiving a letter combination. And the most important thing that you've already mentioned, Chris and Jarrell and Susan, is the feedback. This is taking us to improved feedback, because teachers, instead of now our students earning a 7 or an 85% or a 9, now they will receive this feedback that the students can understand, so that the students can understand the areas of improvement and try to reach the next level. So it is improving our learning and our teaching in that way through the feedback. Also, students have more ownership of their education.
Thank you for bringing that up, Veronica. You're You're right on. And it is all about the students. We love our students. Our students are incredible and we want what's best for them. We want them to be successful. And we've found that our students, if they're at the center of their learning and they're using rubrics and they're having success, that their confidence is built. And so let's talk a little bit about that from a student perspective, because I think, Ms. K, your students, they're okay with standards-based practices. They've been doing them for 3 years. But we have some high school seniors and some juniors that are like, what? I've always been an A student. You're taking away my identity with this whole new MEE. And how do I get an MEE? And the focus actually is on the learning, but let's talk about some of the philosophies that we've adopted with standards-based grading. So the parents and students, I think we'll have some secondary students that might actually listen to this Sharkast, hopefully. They'll be able to know a little bit about what are the philosophies that we're adhering to at IAA when it comes to standards-based grading. So maybe one of you could give me a definition. If you're at home watching this, you can see the definition up there. It's been up on the screen for a while, so you probably had a chance to read it. But Susan is very, very much more educated than I am. So I'll let her read our definition.
Standards-based grading, SBG, is an intentional way for teachers and students to track learning progress and achievements while focusing on helping students learn and reach their highest potential. It is based on students showing signs of mastery or understanding various lessons and skills. Students are the center of their learning while using rubrics and having multiple chances to show mastery on a given standard.
So with the expert panel, what are some key words to you as educators that really jump out at you?
Learning targets, the use of rubrics. All of these two things will allow for sure our students to engage in their learning and have ownership. They learn to self-assess, to self-reflect. They identify their own areas of improvement, and they can help self-direct their activities.
It reminds me of when I was a kid, Veronica, and my mom used to always say at the dinner table, what did you learn today in school? And she'd say it to us kids. I was the oldest. And yeah, Chris did the little shoulder shrug. I don't know. I don't know. Just math. I learned math. Those were my answers. Those are my siblings' answers. But with clear learning targets and rubrics, parents should be able to ask that question at the dinner table. And even their first grade students should be able to say, my learning target today was this, and we worked on this. They know very clearly what they're learning and what their goals are.
Yeah, I think it's very important for kids to be able to track their own learning progress. For me, this is more than just what you score at IAA. As they age and they become adults, they're going to get jobs one day, and they're going to have careers, and they're going to want to be able to track their progress on different projects and assignments for work. So for me, standards-based grading, it's a lifelong skill. It's going to support them as they become college students and as they become young professionals, and they have to meet certain targets and certain goals in their careers and in their university life. So I feel that we are preparing students to be able to self-manage themselves and be in the driver's seat of their own learning. And by getting feedback, we're also teaching them how to reach out for support. Hey, teacher, I know you taught us how to find the slope of an angle last week, but I didn't understand this one particular aspect. Can we work on that together? And being able to manage up like that is going to help them in the work world too, because they may have a boss where they need to work with that person and find out what are their areas of improvement. So we're really teaching them a lifelong skill. This goes way beyond reading, writing, math, and science. So what stands out to me is that self-monitoring and tracking their own learning. That's a lifelong skill.
Great.
I'm gonna echo that and go even saying the multiple chances to show mastery, because oftentimes in the real world, if you don't, say you submit a project to your boss and he says, no, this isn't right, you usually have the opportunity to go back through and make it to what they need. If it's something, given you're submitting it before the deadline, but you have opportunities in the real world to improve upon what you've already made or what you've already learned. And so that should be echoed here in the school, especially teaching our students how to do that, how to seek help, how to resubmit or have an extra chance to show mastery. I think that's very important.
Thank you for sharing that, each of you. I've had up on the screen the last couple of minutes a list of shared practices. So if you're at home, you probably had a chance to look at some of those. We've been talking about a few of those here and there, but these are practices that we've agreed upon. All the teachers in the school have agreed. This is what we're going to do as a school to support our students and help them be successful. So I'm just going to ask one really quick question, and I think it's a really important question, especially for our high school students and their parents. But what about university? Won't they penalize my kid if they have a standards-based report card? And will it be harder for them to get into university? Does anyone have an answer for that question? I've heard that before.
I have an answer for that. No, it's not going to affect in any way the ability to get into university for many reasons. One, many universities are switching over to standards-based grading in sometimes their first year, second year, or entirely for the 4 years. MIT is an example of one of those universities that is using standards-based grading in their university. But also, we as a school send with the student's transcript a description of what our grades mean, of how it breaks down into a GPA. And we give that to the university so that they can understand exactly what it means for an MEE, for an ME. And so it doesn't hurt the student. In reality, even a B, C, D school has their own grade ranges. For example, I went to a school where a 93% was an A. My friend went to a school where a 90% was an A. So right there, if I had an A and he had an A, it was two different numbers. So
yeah,
to universities, A, B, C, they don't use that. They don't even use that.
Every school has to submit to the universities a school profile, because every school grades so differently, and they have to say, here's how we grade, here's what these letters and these numbers mean. And then each university on top of that does their own GPA calculations. So we do a GPA calculation, we give that to the universities, but then at the same time, the university will take and they'll recalculate it based on the classes that they want to count and based on how they want to count it. So it doesn't hurt our students. In fact, I don't know if you guys know this, if you've heard this, but Harvard has gone to standards-based grading, but they've gone to the extreme during the pandemic. They've switched to, they only give 2 grades now, satisfactory or unsatisfactory, to all their undergraduate students. So it's interesting that some of the premier universities that you think of, like MIT and Harvard and others, they're understanding that it's about learning, that should be the key. It shouldn't be about, okay, what do I need to do to get an A? It should be about, okay, what have I learned and how can I show you that I've learned it? And like Chris said, it's more about the process. If you can go through a process of creating something and making it better and revising it and receiving feedback from a boss and making it better and improving it, then you're more apt for the real world. I have a question for the panel, but it has to do with something Chris said earlier. And Chris, you can clarify this, but I've heard this from some students and from some parents at Inter-American Academy. Chris, you said you weren't very good at turning in your homework, but you did really well on the test. So I would ask you the question as a panel, isn't a standards-based learning system just rewarding the lazy kids and penalizing the kids that work hard?
I don't think so. Because for some students, it gives us as teachers an opportunity to perhaps realize maybe that student is in too easy of a class. And it's not that he's not working hard or she's not working hard. It's that they don't need to work hard and they need to be moved up so that they can have that opportunity to work hard. But we have Shark standards as well. where we ask students to be accountable, respectful, kind, honest, and safe. And if a student isn't turning in all of their assignments, if you guys can't see on the screen right now, there is a rough draft of a rubric for Shark standards. And it says under accountable that a student turns in all assignments. That means that student is meeting the expectations. They have turned in all of their assignments.
Chris, I would also add that students who perform at the highest levels will continue to be rewarded, right, with the highest level of academic achievement. And this is going to be reported on their transcripts as well, that they were exemplary. So that is a special designation for students who perform at the highest levels. And let's be honest, every child is different. And I think that parents, when they send their children to school, they expect us to meet their child's individual needs. And with standards-based grading and standards-based learning, some students will start off as approaching expectations, and that's fine. It's our job as educators to help them reach the next level. And for those students who do work the hardest, and for those students who do have the highest levels of achievement, there are still special honors for them with things like National Honor Society. So a combination of the Shark standards along with the academic grades will provide opportunities for our hardworking students.
Those at home might not know this. Susan alluded to it earlier, but we have probably I would say we have the best gifted program in Latin America. Okay, that's a bold statement, but I've talked to directors from all over the world and all over Latin America, and they want to know about our gifted program. They want to know about our student support program. They want to know about our standards-based grading practices. We hosted an inclusion conference last January, the last major educational conference in the world before the pandemic. And we had 63 presenters from all over the world that came to our humble little campus and presented because they're experts in these areas and in these educational practices. So you are stakeholders, parents and students, in an organization that has the highest standard and that's on the cutting edge. So I wanted to give the panel a chance. Last word, what would you tell the IAA community about our effort towards standards-based learning or about our school that you're proud of?
I think it's a difference between delivering instruction and facilitating instruction. And it's what we see. Instead of seeing our children as students, we see them as learners. Proficiency versus growth, and teacher-centered versus learner-centered. So it's passive learning and active learning. It's what I'm trying to say.
I would just say that the school has a number of different initiatives that are very successful. And the community, the stakeholders should be very proud of everything that goes on every day on this campus. It's an amazing institution. And I think one of the strongest points is what you mentioned, on the fact that we look at each child and we find a place for each child so they can be successful. And the institution, the teachers, the stakeholders, the parents should be all congratulated for those efforts.
As a teacher, I think I'm the only one that's actually in the classroom of this panel this year. And as a teacher using standards-based grading, it's a game changer. I have a lot more of an opportunity to work with individual students on their individual needs, because I can quickly and easily see what it is that student is struggling with or what they're accelerating in.
I'm also very proud of our students, right? So they've had to learn this new system. Some of our students have progressed from the elementary school where they already knew it, and it was easier for them in the middle school. But for students who are new to it, I've seen it with my own children, right? So I've seen both of my sons complete their work. And when I ask them, what's your next step? They'll say, oh, well, my teacher said that I need to do this. So they know the performance criteria. Or if I ask one of my sons, well, what happened? Why did you get an approaching expectations on this? And they'll say, well, I forgot my conclusion. Mr. Holmquist said that I need to include at least 3 sources. So they're very aware of what they have to do in order to perform. There's no mystery.
between all of us in this room, we have at least 100 years of experience in education. So let's hear a big Go Sharks for IAA community. Count of three. 1, 2, 3.
Go,
Go
Shark.